Good evening, everybody.
Kavod Harav, how are you?
Baruch Hashem, sorry to make you wait. Okay, very good. So just wanted to point out one thing, right? What we said yesterday regarding the woman, reading the Megillah. So we said, right, that the halacha is that she's allowed to read the Megillah for the men, but if you have no men there, they know how to read it, she can read it, no problem. But the question is, if that's the case, why don't we allow them also to read the Torah? Yeah, so isn't it the same thing? But women are not allowed to go up to the Torah, right, to read. So why is that? So the answer is like this, that the reason, so the rabbis decreed that the woman should not go up to the Torah to read. And as we said yesterday, right, the problem is not because, they're going to hear her singing, right? We said that's not a problem. Why? Because Divrei Torah, there's a rule like this, it says in the halacha that Divrei Torah lo mekabel tuma, lo mekabim tuma. When it comes to Torah, it doesn't become like something which is impure. So that's why, it's not really a problem, as we said yesterday, right? We mentioned that, but when it comes to reading the Torah, they made a decree. And the reason is because it's going to be an embarrassment, if she goes up to read. What's the embarrassment? It embarrasses the men, no man knows how to read the Torah, and so we have to have the woman do it, so it's like a disgrace for the men. So this is why they decreed, that the woman shouldn't read the Torah. But this doesn't apply to the Megillah, because when it comes to Megillah, the rabbis didn't decree this, thing. When it comes to the Torah, they did decree. That's the difference, right, between one and the other. Okay, so let's go on to Gimel. As we said, right, yesterday, that we have androgynous, so we're talking about a hermaphrodite. So it says regarding this in the Bet Yosef, Tosefta Kitaba Harosh Beper Kama de Megillah. So there's a Tosefta and the Rosh brings it down. That what? Then when it comes to the androgyne, right, whatever you want to call it, right, the hermaphrodite, you can only fulfill the obligation of people who are like him. Why? According to the opinion that says the women cannot fulfill the obligation. Why is that? Because we're not sure, right? What's his gender is. Is he considered to be a man or a woman, right? So, since it's not a sure thing, he shouldn't be fulfilling the obligation of somebody who's a man or a woman because those things are for sure, and he's not for sure. So his obligation is on a lower level than the obligation of the man and the woman. So therefore, you cannot fulfill their obligation. It's really a doubt, We're not even whatever. Yeah, it's a doubt. Yeah, basically that's what it is.
So the androgyne is still obligated to hear the Megillah. They just can't fulfill for somebody else.
Right, because as we said, right, both men and women are obligated. So either way, right, whether he's a man or a woman, he's obligated anyway. Right, that's the idea.
And
Yeah.
same for the Tumtum.
Yeah, so Tumtum, right, it says here, right, that even himself he can't, right, fulfill his obligation.
Oh, okay.
Uh, I'm sorry, I didn't say it right. Not himself, but another Tumtum. He can't fulfill the obligation of another Tumtum. Why? Because this guy could be a guy, and that could, this guy could be a girl, and that one is a guy, so that would be a problem. According to this opinion, you know what I mean? So that's why, when it comes to Tumtum, it's even worse. By the way, today, probably if they had a case like this, I don't know if there are cases like this, but where the genitalia are covered or whatever, hidden, they could probably solve that problem, surgically today, or, they could do they could do some kind of ultrasound on him and see what he really is.
That or the DNA testing would tell you the gender, right?
Oh, I don't know. I'm not a big expert in DNA, but right.
You would be able to tell which sex chromosomes they have.
Okay, so I mean, if you know about DNA, I don't really know so much. So if you know, I believe you. I take your words right as the truth. Yeah, I don't really know much about it. I never took a DNA test.
I don't know where that would fall in the halacha if there was, I know that
I was just at the doctor's office today, and so some nurse comes in and she starts talking to me. So she tells me that she's Russian. I asked her, "Are you Jewish?" So she says, "No, not really." But she says, "I took a DNA test," she tells me, "and I'm 8% Jewish," she tells me. Yeah. So, then she comes back in again and asks me, she says, "So does that make me into a Jew or what does that mean?" She was curious. So I told her, no, I told her, I said, in halacha, DNA is not really acceptable for anything. I mean, you can't prove anything with DNA.
Right. So
In
that
halacha.
I agree with in terms of the halacha because
Yeah.
that's all like people who report that they're Jewish and then what chromosomes they have. But when it comes to sex chromosomes,
Gender.
if a
Yeah.
person XY, then they're male, and if they have XX, then female.
Right, right. Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but in halacha, though, we would have to actually see the,
The evidence.
evidence.
Okay. I understand the coverage. I've seen with the coverage genitalia. And then we've talked, I think you and I have talked about the XXY chromosome where they have both male and female traits, which the androgyne or whatever. Anyway, but I was just wondering when it was somebody who you don't know what their gender is, there's nothing in halacha that would make room for like our ability to see
As we said, right, the rabbi has, tshuvot about this, about this DNA business, and he also writes there that, it's not acceptable in halacha, to prove anything. But, his son, the chief rabbi, he did say one time, I heard him saying, which makes sense, we don't use it as like, prima facie evidence, you know what I mean? Whatever that's called, I don't know. I'm using fancy terms. I don't think I even know what they mean. But anyway, right? So I'm not even sure if I know what they mean. Get your Googles out. Okay. But anyway, right? He says that you can use it as supportive evidence. What that means is that if you already have some evidence, you know what I mean, like to make it stronger, that comes and strengthens the evidence. That maybe possibly could be done. You know what I mean? But the DNA itself will not establish any facts in Torah. And the reason is because, it's circumstantial evidence. You know what I mean? It's not really like, visible, tangible evidence. So, and by the way, there are some rabbis who also write that sometimes, these tests can be wrong. Sometimes, there are mistakes. I don't know. I'm not really sure. I'm not a big expert in DNA. I haven't really studied it at all. The issue of DNA. I think they did give us some, information when I was in school, about this, but I think I was half asleep in the school, so when they were giving this lecture, so I don't think I got it so good. But anyway, right.
We
So
can
you got
talk about, I understand what you're saying, and
yeah.
prima facie correctly.
Okay.
Maybe not aware of it, but you did.
Okay.
But we can talk about it later because like something like a karyotype, it is physical evidence because it shows you the actual chromosomes. But we can talk about it later. I'm curious.
Right, I understand you, but it's not really called physical evidence. The only thing which is physical evidence is what the eye can see.
I see.
You know what I mean? So, we don't see the genes. It's just like
No, we
comes up,
said
comes up on a piece of paper. You know what I mean? It gets printed out, whatever.
You can see it. You can see the chromosomes, but I mean, obviously with a microscope, but you can see them.
Yeah, no, you can see. Yeah, I mean, yeah, but it's not something you can. In other words, the eye can't see what gender it is there. You know what I mean? By looking at that, only because you know the theory behind it. You know what I mean? Not because you actually see the genitalia.
It's not the genitalia; it's the chromosomes. But
That's what I'm
we'll
saying.
talk later.
You don't see the genitalia. You just see the theory which is behind it. I'm saying, yeah. So you don't. So that's not really called visible evidence. You know what I mean? It's not really. Yeah, it has to be like something you can actually see.
All right, we'll talk.
By the
about
way,
it.
let me tell you how far it goes. This whole thing, right? When it comes to Torah law, Torah law is very precise. Very, 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 very rigid about this. We also don't accept, other types of, circumstantial evidence. For instance, I'll give you an example. Let's say, like, like things that they do accept in the Torah in the Goyish world, right? Like, hairs, and all kinds of, blood stains, none of that is accepted as evidence. All these things. But the Goyim, they use all kinds of things like that, to prove things, to right in court. They bring all kinds of things. We don't accept any kind of evidence, which is not physically, verifiable, visible to the naked eye. As the Talmud says, that en le dayan ela ma she'einav ro'ot. The dayan only can judge according to what his eyes see. In other words, physically you see it. And that, by the way, that's what I want to mention. That we also don't accept like audio recordings or or any let's say like you take like a snapshot like on the internet of something a person had let's say a chat with somebody, right? We don't accept, that's not acceptable. So you can't bring some email and say, oh, that proves it. There you go, right? We don't accept emails, right? No snapshots. We don't accept also videos, by the way, are not acceptable. You cannot bring a video of somebody killing somebody and prove that he killed somebody like that. No such a thing like that. So what you do need is two witnesses that saw, the act with their naked eye. That's the only way you can prove anything. That's the way it is in Torah law. But the Goyim, they do accept all these things in some constellation or other, right? They're allowed to. They're allowed to. By the way, they're allowed to do that. The Goyim, they have permission, because they set up their court system. So they set it up according to the way they see fit. In other words, right? The Torah gives them permission to do that. But we as Jews, don't use those things. Yeah, the truth is, when it comes to Goyish law, you don't need two witnesses. One witness is enough, according to the Torah. So it's a little bit different Goyish law. You know what I mean? Not the same thing. You can convict somebody with one witness in Goyish court, according to the Torah law. But when it comes to Jews, you need two witnesses, two kosher witnesses, right? Kosher witness is not a little thing, by the way. You have to know. It has to be like that guy's really religious and God-fearing person. If he's not so religious, not so God-fearing, we don't accept that either. So, and also another thing, which is outrageous. I mean, there was just this case where, right, this lady, I don't want to get into politics now, but, there was this lady who accused Trump, of raping her, in some department store. You know what I'm talking about? So, and she got money from this, she got cash. And this guy denies it, right? Says, I never met you. But this lady, when they cross-examine her, she doesn't remember the year it was, the date it was, the month, nothing, In Torah law, that will be thrown out because if you don't remember all these details, they're gonna like drill you. When was it? Where? When? All these things. If you don't know, you can't. You can't write. You can't prove anything like that. So the Torah law is much more rigid. When it comes to testimony, than Goyish law. In Goyish law, you can prove things. With all kinds of crazy, ways. The Torah law doesn't accept those things. So it's a different ball game altogether. It's a whole right. But as we said, right, DNA is also considered to be in Torah law as circumstantial because it's not really something you can see with the naked eye. So whatever, right? Okay, it's a long story. I don't want to get into it too much. I don't want to take you out of the trend over here. So anyway, right? But it's good to know these things because you know. Also, another thing, with that case is that, it was like his word against hers, and there was no witnesses that saw what happened, if something happened, and they anyway they gave her money, and that's not right because it's your word against his. So why should we believe you? The Torah law doesn't work like that. I mean, you can't believe somebody if they don't have a witness, at least one witness, when it's a goy. Okay, so anyway, we're getting here to the Bet Yosef. So as we said, right, there's a Tosefta which is brought in the Rosh, and the first parak of Megillah, Siman Dalet, Ukraini Be'er Siman Tavkub Peitet, was also explained, right, on this Siman, which is I'm translating into English, right, 589, right? If you're curious, Le'inyan Tikiyat Shofar, regarding Shofar, right? It must be the laws of Rosh Hashanah. So it's possible that you learn from there about regarding the reading of the Megillah. So it was already explained there that what about if a person is like half a slave and half free, right? There is such a thing like that, right, in Torah law. He can't even fulfill the obligation of himself. But Rabbeinu didn't write this, right, the Torah. Why? Because he relies on what he wrote over there. But it says, however, if he holds that slaves that circumcised and they immersed in the mikveh to be slaves, they are obligated in reading the Megillah. Like just like women are. Alter Shapir, then it comes out good. He didn't mention here that he doesn't fulfill the obligation of himself. So there's also Tosefta the Rosh brought. Lo uzkar mishum dechevan deloach shayach lemimar. It wasn't mentioned there because it's not relevant to say that. It's a slave side of him doesn't come and fulfill the obligation of the free side. Because the slave is also obligated. So therefore he fulfills the obligation. So in other words, it's not exactly the same kind of case. So therefore that's why he didn't bring it. So if you're going to tell me that right from that, because of that reason, Yotzi Gamken et Mino, he also fulfills the obligation of his gender, right? That there is to say that even though that he's liable from either way, right? Whether he's a slave or a free person, but since he's a mixture of slave and free, right? Since the side of the slave is not really, recognizable by itself, and also the side, the free side, so he shouldn't be fulfilling the obligation of others, even if they're also the same thing as him. So you have to say that Tam ze ledat Rashi. This is going to Rashi. Shesober the nashim motziot et nashim, that he holds that the women can fulfill the obligation of the men, as we said yesterday. Ve'afilu hachi tumtum eno motzi mino b'tama. Says nevertheless tumtum doesn't fulfill the obligation even of his own kind. But tama mishum detfe adif kasheotzi hu vadai isha. He says because it's better that Yeah, Shomia Zachar, right? So you have like a woman who's reading and the man is listening. Um, yeah, so it's different than when you're talking about the tumtum. Afilu ima shomia nekeva. Even if the person who's hearing is a female, afilu im shomia tumtum, and or even if the one who's hearing is a tumtum, the salka date chamina. You would have thought to say, kiva the tarva yuchad minaninu, that since they're both the same type, nafku hadade, so they can fulfill the obligation one or the other. Yidich watan. Kamashmalan comes to teach you the la mishum the law. It's not so. Mishum the bayinan shamotzi etachrim yidich watan yeh nekar, because we require that the one who fulfills the obligations of others should be recognizable. Imhu zachar or nekeva. We have to be able to recognize if he's a male or female. Velo tekshed meandroginas, and don't ask me from the androgyne. Right, shemotzi et abino, that he can't fulfill the obligation of his own kind. Tahatam shani shekvar hu nekar shehu b'riyah b'fnei atzmo, because there it's recognizable that he's a creation. He's a creation. He's a type of being which is recognizable by itself. By, in other words, he has a certain unique structure right in his body. So it's like a unique gender. So therefore it's recognizable. But when it comes to tumtum, it's different. Why? Because the tumtum, we don't know what he is, right? He's all covered up. So, we don't have any tangible information. So this one could be a boy, the other one could be a girl, even though they're both tumtum, So it doesn't really help you much. Okay, so that's Bet Yosef. Let's see Shulchan Aruch. Yeah, so it says androgynos motzi mino velo shelo mino. It says that the androgyne, he fulfills the obligation of his own type, but not somebody who's a different type. So if you have two hermaphrodites, right, they can read one for the other, the Megillah. Right? Yeah, go find that on YouTube. I hope you. I don't think you're gonna find that on YouTube. This video. Very rare, such a thing like that, right? But that's what it is. So then you have tum. Yeah. But when it comes to tumtum and somebody who's half a slave, even his own kind doesn't fulfill the obligation. So as we said, right, the reason there is because we're not sure which gender they have. So one could be like this, the other one could be something else. Right? And also when it comes to the slave, which is half and half, the problem over there is that it's not recognizable, right? Which half is this and which half is that? We don't know. So therefore, right, you can't even fulfill this obligation of his own kind. Okay, that's very interesting.
Kavod Harav, so they are also exempt for putting tefillin, right? Naturally, no?
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
Since they don't know the gender, it's unknown, they don't put tefillin on, correct? They're exempt.
No, they should put, because it's like a doubt, so when there's a doubt from the Torah, we have to go stringent.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So, yeah, but they would probably put it on without a blessing,
Okay.
We don't want a blessing in a case like that.
Thank you.
Okay, God bless. So, right, and he brings here in the Ramah, and some say he can't fulfill the obligation of himself. But you have to hear from others. So let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah here, what he says about this. Right, so the Mishnah Berurah, right, says it good, because this is brought down also in many places, but he says, right, why can't one slave who's half slave and half free fulfill the obligation of someone else who's the same status as him. So, right, he brings here, what the sages say, that the slave part from him cannot fulfill the obligation of somebody else that he has that side of freedom, right? It's a little bit difficult to understand that. Because they both have, like half slave, half free, right? That's their status. So you would think, right, that that can be done, but the rabbis say no. It's a little bit of a difficult concept to swallow. The issue with the slave, with the tumtum, it's understood, right? It's very clear.
It gets straightened out one day.
But with the slave, it's a little bit hard, Uh, okay. Anyway, we'll go on. I don't want to spend too much time on this. It's not very practical anyway. Slaves around today. So then we're going to the next piece of the tour. We already read this. So it says, right, that when it comes to cheresh, right, which is deaf mute, shoteh, retard, katan, and the child, they cannot fulfill the obligation of others. Right? And we already mentioned, right, why that is. Rabbi Yehuda machshir bekatan. So, but Rabbi Yehuda says that when it comes to katan, it's okay. The child is okay. Mishnah Perek Shenit ben Megillah. Where is this the source for this? Says the Rabbi Yosef, second parak of Megillah, Yitat Amud Bet. Hakok Shem Likot the Megillah. Everybody's kosher to read the Megillah. Chutz Micheresh Shoteh Katan. Except these three, right? That we just mentioned: the deaf mute, the child, and the retard. Rabbi Yehuda Machshir Bekatan. And Rabbi Yehuda says the Katan is okay. Bekatvu Tosfot says Tosfot V'Yakrochach Bekatan Shegiel Lechinuch Ma'ere, because he says he must be talking about Katan who was already at the age of chinuch, for training, because he's also obligated, as we said, right? The Ibn Shelo Yigia Lechinuch, because if it was somebody who didn't get that age yet, my Talmud Rabbi Yehuda, why would Rabbi Yehuda say it's okay? ואם תאמר אחי מה טעמה דרבנן דכיוון דמקרא מגילה דרבנן לתת דרבנן ומקריב דרבנן. So then you're going to ask me, right? What about the first opinion? Why do they say that you can't, right? That when it comes to Megillah, which is only from the rabbis, so let one rabbinical, obligation come and fulfill the obligation of another rabbinical, right? They're all rabbinical, so why can't you do it? Because right? Like we said over there in Brachot Chaf Amud Bet, Bechai Mevarech Aviv Leaviv Af Al Pi Shehu Katan Ve'Yotzeh Birkato. Regarding what we said, right, that there's a issue there going on there. Birkato Mokela Hatan B'Deachal Shiura. It says there that the child can fulfill the obligation of his father, and it qualifies it there and says that we're talking about a case where he ate enough, right? He had enough to eat, to say the blessing. So then what happens is that also the obligation of the child is also rabbinical. And therefore fulfills the obligation. Right, so let's say over here the same thing, right? So he says, but it's a little bit different here. Why? Because when it comes to Megillah, right, even for the adults, it's only rabbinical. And the rabbi and the katan is only obligated from the rabbis, b'shar mitzvot and mitzvot, u'gadol leka el achad derabanan. So therefore, when it comes to the adult, it's only one rabbinical decree. The Megillah, right, one in Megillah, so it doesn't come something which has two rabbinical degrees, and cannot fulfill the obligation of something which is one rabbinical. So I want to explain that to you, right? What that means, right? So what we mean to say here is like this: that the child, right, doesn't have the obligation to read uh, from the Torah to say it after blessing at all, right? Even not from the Torah, not from the rabbis. So what happened was that, but if an adult, right, he's satiated, that it's from the Torah. You know, to say Birkat Hamazon, grace after meals. For the child, it's like two rabbinical things going on there. You know, that he's absolved because he didn't eat enough. That's one thing, and he's also absolved because he's a child. So it's like two rabbinical decrees there. You know, one on top of the other. That makes it weaker. You know. When it comes to the adult, though, it's only one. What does that mean? He didn't eat, he wasn't satiated, so he's not really obligated from the Torah to bless, but he's rabbinically is obligated. So it's only one rabbinical decree. That's what he wants to say. Okay, so therefore, right, what we're trying to say is that because of this reason, since the obligation of the child is weaker than the obligation of the parent, right? So it doesn't work out with Megillah. But Rabbi Yehuda says it does work out, right? Because he says, well, what? All you know, they're all rabbinical, you know. In this case, anyway, right? But wait a second, right now you should be asking me a question over here, right? Because didn't we say yesterday that Purim is not rabbinical? It's direct Kabbalah. It's from the prophets. You should be asking me, but Rabbi, yesterday, you know, you said something else, no? So how did it come out now? We're saying that's rabbinical. So the answer seems to be, if I were to have the right understanding, is that Purim itself, you know, the holiday, is from it's Divrei Kabbalah to celebrate the holiday, you know. But when it comes to reading the Megillah, it's only rabbinical. So I think that's the proper way to understand it. That decree was made by the rabbis, not by the prophets. So what that means is that the prophets decreed that they should, you know, do Purim as a holiday, you know, and then the rabbis came in some later generation and decreed that we should read the Megillah. So reading the Megillah itself could be that's only rabbinical, but especially the night one, right? The night one, as we mentioned already, is not from the prophets. It was made later on, you know, in a different generation by some rabbis. They added that they should also read the Megillah at night, but really the original decree was to read it only daytime, one time. They came and they added the night. So now we got to read twice, right? That's the bottom line. So make sure, right, you find a good synagogue, you know, that somebody reads well there, and go and hear the reading of the Megillah. Make sure you got it planned out. Okay, so let's go on. That which it says, right? The Torah said that the Rosh wants to go like the first opinion. Also, the Rif seems all the way. The Rambam, right? In the Rambam, that which we said that instead of the we don't allow these people, right? The Cheresh, the deaf mute, and the Katan, the child. So he says this Cheresh that we're talking about here, Afilu b'midbar ve'eno shomea b'medaber, right? He's talking about b'medaber. Even if he speaks and he doesn't hear, he's also absolved. Even though the word Cheresh usually means that he doesn't hear and doesn't speak either. But if he has only one faculty and not the other, right? Speaking and hearing, Harahem kepikim. They're considered to be like usually as somebody who's mentally fine. L'chol divrei right in all their matters. Kedita bepek misha chazor, like it says within Gitin, Ayin Aleph Amud Aleph. Afilu hachi cheresh memdaber beno shomeh, but it's nevertheless in this case somebody who does speak and doesn't hear lo chazil mikra doesn't can't read the Megillah. Diate la Rabbi Yossi, because it comes out like Rabbi Yossi. The Amar Perek Hayakoreh. They said in this Perek Brachot Tet Vav Amud Aleph. Hakoret Shema velo shimiya ozno. If he reads the Shema and didn't he didn't hear it in his ears, lo yatzai, didn't fulfill his obligation. Vechevan deihu lo nafiku. And even though he himself doesn't fulfill his obligation, nami lo mapik. So he says like this, right? Even since he doesn't fulfill the obligation of others, he doesn't fulfill the obligation of himself either. Why? Because he can't hear what he's saying. Nami lo mafik. As the words are explained in the Gemara, Yud Aleph, Yud Tet Amud Aleph, the Kamar Man Tana Cheresh De'avad Nami lo. Who is the Tana that says that Cheresh, even with De'avad, he cannot fulfill his obligation? Amar Matna Rabbi Yosehi. So he says this rabbi, that's Rabbi Yosef. The Tana correct Shema, because it says there, the one who reads the Shema, velo shmiya, no, he didn't hear it in his ears, yatsa. He fulfills his obligation. Rabbi Yossi says, lo yatsa. He says he didn't fulfill obligation. Well, if he's there, lo kaimalan ki hayt matnitin. According to this, we don't hold like this Mishnah. Tahab perk hayakore, because in perk hayakore, ifsika lachil chata sham begemara, it was passing over in the Gemara in Tet Vav Amud Aleph, Amud Bet. I'm sorry. It was passing in the Gemara. To look Rabbi Yossi, not like Rabbi Yossi. And if so, if that's the case, then the Cheresh who can speak but not hear, he can fulfill the obligation of others, and not like the Mishnah. So he says, therefore, we should be wondering on the Rambam, he passes over there in the laws of Megillah, then if a deaf person was reading, the one who heard from him did not fulfill his obligation. And also the Rif, right? And the Rosh also there. They wrote the Mishnah according to regular explanation. Well, mashma the implies that they hold the halakha here. That's halakha. But he says you can push it out and say she'en sobring. But they hold the apal gav the Talmud moke matnitin Rabbi Yosef, even though Talmud, right, qualifies the Mishnah like Rabbi Yosef. That's only if we say that, just like they're arguing about Kriyat Shema, also arguing about, they're also arguing about Megillah. But since we see that Rabbi Yudan Nasi in this perek, Gabi Kriyat Shema, regarding Kriyat Shema, Katava Koret Shema Velo Shemi Al. They says that if you read the Kriyat Shema and you didn't hear in your ears, Yatzai, he fulfills obligation. Rabbi Yosef Lo Yatzai. Rabbi Yosef says he didn't fulfill his obligation. The Savar de Yatzai Mishum de Hachikatane La Bestam, that he holds that he fulfills obligation because it says, right, Bestam, it says like Stam with no author. Rabbi Yosef the Palig Hu Yachida, and Rabbi Yosef is like a single opinion, right, against everybody. The Gabi Megillah Katan Stam de Lo Yatza. But when going to the Megillah, just the opposite, right? It says in the regular halacha on the right with no author that he didn't fulfill his obligation. And didn't write anybody argues with it. So we should say the Sfira the Megillah Shani, that maybe the whole that the Megillah is different than right the case of the of the Kriyat Shema. So why is it different? The Bainan Bad Presumanisa, because we require the publication of the miracle, right? So therefore, if you didn't hear it, you're not really publicizing anything, even not to yourself. That's a little porous, he says. They say something like that. The Talmud the Megillah, because we see, right, the Talmud, right, holds that the Megillah, Kriyat Shema and Kriyat Shema, they're equal. So there's no difference between them. So how can we make a differentiation, right? If the Talmud holds that they're equal, how can we differentiate? It says in Orchot Chaim. Let me just see how far we have here. Okay, almost finished. So it says, right, In Orchot Chaim, it says there. כתוב שהרמב"ם, it says that the Rambam לא הוציא מכלל המוציאים אלא משוטה וקטן לבד. So he says he only disqualified the Rambam from the שוטה, the retard and the קטן, ולא הוציא חרש, but he didn't say חרש, the deaf mute. נראה שנוסחת ספר הרמב"ם שבאדם מוחלקת משלנו, right? So it says, it seems like his text of the Rambam is different than our text, because in our text it says all three of them. כתב הרש פרצמח, says the Rashbet's בתשובה and Yerushalmi, he says Yerushalmi there, אמרינן דאמתניתין לית כאן חרש ולפי, so he says that there's no חרש, there's no deaf mute, that's not written there. ולפי גמרא דידן, מה יראה במדבר ואינו שומע? So it's going to our Gemara, it's talking about somebody who speaks but cannot hear. ואתיה כמאן דאמר, so this is according to the one who says, צריך שישמיע לאוזנו, that he has to hear it with his ears. לא דומה דשוטה וקטן, doesn't resemble, right, the retard and the child. דהינו אפילו בדיעבד קריאתם פסולה. Because with them, right, even בדיעבד, they're right, their reading doesn't fulfill the obligation. אבל חרש המדבר ואינו שומע, but when it comes to חרש, who can speak and not hear, יוציא אחרים בקריאתו, he does fulfill the obligation of others. Is being about b'shofar and a motzi. When it comes to shofar, it doesn't fulfill the obligation. Tama mishum de shmiat talia milta. So he says the reason is because it really depends on hearing it. Mevarchim ala shmiya, because we're blessing on hearing it. V'chevan sheno shomea, and since he can't hear this guy, eno mechuyab b'davar, he's not really obligated. V'lo mapik aval, so therefore he doesn't fulfill the obligation. Aval the Megillah, when it comes to Megillah, that was different. The B'kiyat talia milta, it really depends on reading. Since he knows how to read, so he's obligated. But somebody who hears and doesn't speak, right? We can't fulfill the obligation when if he blows a shofar. That's the end of it. Okay, so we'll do the Shulchan Aruch and we're done. Let's see. So yeah, it says here, it's very short, Shulchan Aruch. Hashomea Megillah mimi shehu mudar. No, this is not the one we needed. 1 second. This one was what? All right, 1 second. Right, so Shulchan Aruch says like this: Echad hakoreh ve'echad hashomea. Right, whether you're the one who's reading or the one who's listening to the Megillah, right? Mina koreh yatzai decholato. You fulfill your obligation, right? So you fulfill your obligation both by reading and by just or hearing it. Vehu sheishma mimi shehu chayav b'kriyatah. But you have to hear from somebody who's obligated to read the Megillah, right? If that person is not obligated, you can't fulfill your obligation from him. By the way, this is a general rule for all the mitzvot. You know what I mean? Somebody cannot fulfill your obligation if he himself is not obligated. And then he goes on. Therefore, if the reader was right a deaf mute, right, or even according to what we just said, just deaf, right, or he's a child, right, or he's a shoteh, he's retarded. So therefore, you don't fulfill the obligation. Why? Because these people are not really obligated like we are, you know. As we said, right? The deaf mute and the shoter, right? The retarded, they're absolved altogether. But the katan, you know, as we said, right, could be obligated, you know, because of chinuch, because of training. But still, it's not the same obligation that we have. You know, so therefore, right, these cannot fulfill the obligation of ours. So then he brings in right. Yesh omrim. Some say shenashim yanam mitziot tanashim. We already mentioned that, right? Some say that women cannot fulfill the obligation of the men, right? We already said that halacha is that they can. Yeah, so I think we did the Shulchan Aruch already one time, but you know, maybe it was a mistake, you know, that I did the wrong one. But anyway, right, that's the idea. So, yeah, we can stop there. So, thanks for coming tonight. Be blessed with wealth, health, and happiness. Shabbat Shalom. Have a great Shabbat. B'ezrat Hashem. And this is now the month of Shvat, you know, so these are times of Shovavim. That's one thing, right? Okay, whatever, you know, it's really like it's not mentioned, you know, this Shovavim thing in the Shulchan Aruch. It's mentioned in the Kabbalah more. But anyway, right, that's one thing. Also, we have, you know, that Shabbat is a good month, you know, for the Jewish people. We have Tu B'Shvat, you know, it's a holiday there. And in general, you know, the Zohar says, right, 3 months out of the year are good for the Jews. Right? Which is that Shavat and Adar and Nisan, right? The next 3 that we have coming up here now, right? Those are the good ones. So therefore, right, you know, we already left Tevet, and Tevet is not such a good month for the Jewish people. You know, so we're getting into better territory here now, right? Better situation. Okay, so be blessed, and we'll see you tomorrow. Not tomorrow, next week, Sunday, right? B'ezrat Hashem. And keep praying, you know, for the Jewish valiant soldiers who are doing an incredible job over there. And you know, there's so much going on. It's just incredible, you know, how much they're doing over there, how much, you know, how much they're suffering, you know. Put yourself in their place, you know, how much they suffer going there. And, you know, going into those tunnels, and they're all booby trapped in there, all those battles that they're doing. It's incredible, you know, just it's above and beyond. A soldier that goes over there, you know, so he deserves that we should pray for them, you know. They should, after all, they're defending us, they're defending our people. Chazak Baruch, all the best.
Kavod Harav, thank you so much.
All the best, bye.